Well, this is a little story about my junior high foray into crime and entrepreneurship. I call it Counterfeit Hall Passes and a Hobo Adventure. Mr. William Cox was my Spanish teacher, and Spanish class was among my favorites in junior high. Mr. Cox was a career teacher in his 50s, short, stocky, with thinning gray hair, oiled down and combed over. Although I imagine teaching foreign language to hillbilly kids who barely spoke standard English was likely a great challenge, he was generally pleasant, patient, and even-tempered. When anyone asked to use the restroom, he'd pull a small slip of paper, a stamp pad, and a rubber stamp from his desk drawer. He stamped the paper slip with his name in red ink and gave it to you for a hall pass. His hall pass procedure became the inspiration for my first and probably most successful foray into the exciting world of crime and entrepreneurship. I'm not sure how the idea occurred to me, but I had the realization that a copy of his stamp would be a valuable asset. I went home and checked the yellow pages for rubber stamps and found Cooper Office Supply on Cherry Street in downtown Chattanooga. I had a pretty good idea of the location since my mom took us to town on the bus to shop at least once a month, and we often ate at the Crystal on Cherry. I called and I asked how much a stamp cost and could they copy one for me if I brought it in on a Saturday. They told me no problem and $3 plus tax. That price was a bit steep for me, about the cost of 2 weeks of school lunch, so I would have to fast a couple of weeks to raise the funds. The time passed quickly, and after school on Friday evening, I slipped into Mr. Cox's room and borrowed the rubber stamp from his desk. Saturday morning, I jumped out of bed, ate a quick breakfast, and told my mom I was going for a bike ride and would be gone all day. I rode my bike to the Parker Farm at the foot of Lookout Mountain where the L&N and Southern Railroads met the Tennessee River. The Southern crossed Lookout Creek on a high trestle and immediately entered a mile-long tunnel through the mountain. The L&N came out of the Wauhatchie Yards across the creek and ran parallel to the mountain till it reached the river, where it made a steep turn and continued outside on the field round the foot of the mountain to Chattanooga. The L&N track passed by the mouth of the historical Lookout Mountain Cavern, where the hobos often stayed. The scouts had camped on the Parker Farm, and we had walked across the trestle and down to the river a few times. The hobos were always friendly and give us a little coffee. I crossed the Lookout Creek on the Southern trestle and hid in the brush on the riverbank along the L&N track. I knew from previous visits that the L&N train slowed to a walk as they rounded the steep curve and often came to a full stop as they waited for the traffic in the Union Yard to clear. I only waited about 20 minutes before I heard the L&N whistle and saw the locomotive coming down the track. It slowed as it approached the curve, and I waited to see if it might stop. I was lucky. It came to a full stop. I ran along the track and found a boxcar with an open door. I quickly climbed in and found it empty. A few minutes passed and we started to move. 15 minutes later, we were pulling into the Union Yard in downtown Chattanooga. As the train came to a stop, I jumped off and ran around the rear of the train, across the yard to Broad Street, where I exited through the freight station. No one noticed, and I was free and clear. My heart was still pounding from the adventure as I covered the 4 blocks to the office supply store on Cherry. I went in and handed the clerk Mr. Cox's rubber stamp and asked if he could make me a copy. He never questioned me. He said yes, and I asked again the cost, and he looked at it and said, well, since it's a small one, and only a single line name, it'd only be $2. He said, come back in an hour. So I went out and wandered around downtown Chattanooga. It was not even noon when I picked up the stamp and headed for the rail yard. I congratulated myself on my success. However, as I arrived at the yard, it suddenly dawned on me that I might have a couple of significant problems. I had no idea which departing train would take me back round the mountain, and the yard was full of workers and a few railroad police milling around. I broke out in a cold sweat as I went into full panic mode. Then I recall passing the Greyhound bus station on my way to the office supply store. It was only 1 block away on Market Street. I ran over and asked the agent if I could catch a bus to the valley. He said one was leaving for Birmingham in 45 minutes. It was a local and would stop at the Chow Time restaurant on Cummings Highway. He said the fare was 80 cents, and I breathed a sigh of relief as I handed him the $1 left over from my stamp purchase. I could not believe how lucky I was the clerk had reduced the price for the smaller stamp. I rode that bus around the mountain, got off at Chow Time, walked 2 miles to where I retrieved my bicycle. It was only about 3 in the afternoon when I got home and collapsed in exhaustion. The entire adventure had only taken a little more than 5 hours. Mom asked how the day had been and if I wanted some lunch, and I said fine and yes. Monday came and I slipped into Mr. Cox's classroom before school and returned his stamp to his desk. At 25 cents per counterfeit hall pass, the stamp proved to be an excellent investment. I never got caught, and over the next couple of years, my supplemental income bought a lot of science fiction paperback books at the drugstore newsstand. So that's the story of my foray into crime and a hobo adventure. Thank you.